60 AD Boudica, the queen of the Iceni tribe, left a mark in history not only because of her actions, but because her name symbolizes a battle not just against Rome, but against the system of oppression that had taken root in Britain after the Roman invasion. Her story is more than a saga of revenge. It is the story of a tragedy that led to war, culminating in an unexpected turn that made even Rome question its invincibility. Very little is known about her childhood. We do know she was the daughter of a chief, perhaps of the Iceni, one of the most influential tribes in Britain at the time. But she did not grow up in luxury. Instead, her life was shaped by the brutal realities of survival. Her life before the rebellion remains largely a mystery, but her tragic fate seemed to set the course for her future. After her husband, the king of the Iceni, was killed by the Romans, and after Roman soldiers publicly humiliated her by beating her and committing an act of violence against her daughters, Boudica swore, "I will have revenge." And it was from this violence that her resolve to lead her people against the invaders was born. This event, perhaps the most hidden of all, was the key to her rise as a leader. Her revolt began with Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, a city that the Romans considered a stronghold. The Romans, who ruled Britain, never expected that a woman, once a queen, could rally such massive resistance. But uniting the tribes, Boudica took command of an army made up mainly of former slaves, peasants, and other oppressed peoples. She wasn't just a leader. She was the kind of figure who could inspire people to fight, to rise up, to follow her. The Britons, armed with swords, axes, and even stones, moved against the Romans with a fury that could not be stifled. Camulodunum was destroyed, burned to the ground, as were several other Roman settlements. The Romans lost thousands of soldiers. It was their first major blow, and it came from a woman. But what few know about Boudica is that her army didn't just use traditional weapons. In some cases, she employed a strategy that no one expected. Through the destruction of Roman infrastructure, the severing of supply lines, and the targeting of their defensive positions, she tried to draw Rome into a war of attrition that would inflict serious losses. This wasn't just a battle, it was a war for survival. After the capture of Camulodunum, Boudica and her army moved on to Londinium. But they already knew that meeting the Roman legions, reinforced with trained armies, was inevitable. This is when their forces began to weaken, despite their resolve. The local tribes that had joined her army started to pull back. Boudica's reliance on traditional battle tactics from her people was beginning to falter, and a direct confrontation with the Roman army loomed. Rome held its ground, gathering about 12,000 soldiers. For Boudica, despite her leadership and bravery, it became a question of principle: win or die. The fate of not just her army but of her people was at stake. When Boudica's army met the Romans in the decisive battle, the outcome was inevitable. The Roman legions, disciplined and armed with advanced weaponry, crushed her forces. Boudica and her army, made up of less experienced fighters, could not withstand the Roman onslaught. In this battle, thousands died, and with them, the last hope for victory. It's believed that Boudica wasn't prepared for total defeat. Her death, however, remains one of the most debated topics in history. Some theories suggest she took poison to avoid capture, while others believe she was executed. In any case, her decision to face death was not one of weakness. It was a strategic choice, her final act of defiance. Her death did not mark the end of her legacy. It marked the beginning of her legend. Her death was not a sign of surrender. It was a symbol. A symbol that, even in the darkest times, one can rise up and fight, even when all seems lost. Rome thought they had silenced her, but with every passing generation, her name grew stronger. And although her army was defeated on the battlefield, she won her victory in the minds of the people, her name forever remembered.